Hey Zwifters, I'm Simon Schofield and this is the Zwiftcast. Coming up on this episode. Extraordinarily perceptive by Zwift, or something that left the community extremely peeved. The XP row. The most important event in women's cycling is just round the corner. Why does it mean so much to Zwift? And farewell to A, B, C and D. Is Zwift racing score goodbye to the disliked racing cats we've had forever? Well, the tour is over, but the tour starts again soon. That's the beauty and mystery of the revived Women's Tour de France, or to give it its full and proper nomenclature, La Tour de France Femmes avec Zwift. And we'll have a preview and long chat with Kate Veronneau, the head of women's cycling at Zwift, later in the episode. But if there is an overarching theme for this episode, then it's not racing in France. It's numbers. A bit of a kerfuffle blew up in the Zwift community over XP score. They're all numbers, right? With HQ pulling off its old trick of making a change and not telling anyone before they did. Zwift. Elsewhere, I've got some fascinating numbers about how many Zwifters are on each level. And we're running the rule over Zwift racing score, which is getting a big revamp. And for Zwifters who race, then that's going to give them a whole new number to mark their progress. Now, I am notoriously bad with numbers, so luckily I'm going to call upon my more numerous co-hosts to help me with some of the spade work here. Eric Slange of Zwift Insider, may I welcome you aboard the good ship, the Zwiftcast, episode 203.
Howdy, Simon. Always nice to hear your voice from across the pond.
And a man who positively lives by the numbers on power meters, trainers, YouTube subscribers, and a whole lot more. Shane Miller of GP Llama YouTube fame. G'day, mate.
G'day, how's it going? I might live on the numbers, but the time zones I'm in, I've got still no idea. It's been a week, and I'm still waking up at 2 a.m. and not getting back to sleep. Coming this way is difficult. I've got to get back to Europe. I've got to get back to summer too. Oh my word, the winter is deep here.
Well, in Upside Down Land, you're heading for winter, aren't you? So good luck with that, mate. It's 30 odd degrees here and very, very pleasant. Okay, listeners, concentrate now because this is not easy. I am going to brutally and possibly inaccurately over-summarise it, and then Eric is going to probably correct me and add a little detail. Zwift messed about with how many XP points you need to level up, made it even more fantastically complicated, and didn't tell anybody anything about it. It was only exposed by a botched implementation that then made it obvious there was messing about going on behind the scenes. 45 words by my count, Eric. My oh my, it's a good deal more involved than that. Now, I would urge you to resist plunging headlong into the deepest of the deep weeds. But how accurate was my 45-word summary?
Fairly accurate. To put a little bit of bones on the summary, I would say, let's see, where do we start? Let's go back to December. This last December, 2023. That's when Zwift added levels 61 to 100. And they also reduced how much XP you needed in order to get to those levels at that point. And then Zwifters started complaining, as we do, because we felt like it was too easy to level up now after Zwift had changed those level requirements, especially because Zwift was now giving more bonus XP for stuff like streaks. There was one Zwifter, even I remember, Teppo Lorio, who leveled up. He went from level 60 to 100 in less than a month after they were released. So it was pretty easy. So then when Zwift got that pushback, they floated the idea of changing their requirements again to increase them. Their idea was to increase them by about 35%. And some people liked that idea and other people didn't. And then Zwift went quiet for a couple of months. Then last week, they changed the level table without announcing it at all. I immediately started seeing comments from Zwifters saying things like, hey, the amount of XP up to my next level, that's changed. What's going on? And the little indicator that said I had accelerated leveling going on, that's not visible anymore. Did Zwift do away with it?
They got found out, didn't they? Like Rapido. Yeah,
it was noticed right away. Like the day it was released, multiple people were commenting. And it was especially noticed because there was a bug or two that made the change pretty easy to spot. To be fair, I'm sure that the vast majority of Zwifters didn't notice a thing, but those who did notice were really confused on the other hand. And I think they were confused because nothing was said about it. They were asking questions like, is this a bug that Zwift is going to fix? Or why isn't Zwift responding to questions in their own forum about this?
Well, confusion and another word beginning with C, communication or brackets lack of, do seem to characterize this little issue. We'll come back to you on both of those things. Jane, not everything can be or even should be easy to understand and simple, but neither should anything be ludicrously or unnecessarily overcomplicated. Into which camp do you feel that Zwift's XP system falls?
Look, in preparation for this episode, I logged in to check on my XP status, and there's still no way to see it from the home screen. I can see my drops, I can see my current level, but I can't see my XP. So complicated doesn't even describe where things are at. Look, on the numbers, I've ridden just over 500, no, actually, let me see the numbers here. 50,000 kilometers. I've just ticked over 50,000 kilometers on Zwift. I have 1,600 hours. I have 1.1 million XP, but I'm still only on level 81. Now, I've gone through all the XP changes and level ups over the years. Where I'm at the moment, I've given up trying to understand it because in any XP money, I'm top of the pops, level 60, level 100 yesterday, level 100 with the new system, but I'm level 81 with 1 point. As I said, I've given up. I'm just going to stick to riding my bike because, yes, it is too complicated.
Okay, well, let's see what HQ have to say for themselves. The big cheeses were all gathered in Nice last weekend for a Zwift event at the end of the men's tour, but they're now back over the Atlantic, and Mark Cote, who leads the product team at Zwift, has been talking to Dave Toll about this whole saga.
Can you fundamentally explain how we got here? Or let's at least go back and look at maybe where we made our first misstep with XP.
We made a misstep on the back and forth communication with the community. Part of it is we wanted to put this out there to see how people would respond during summer. There's a little bit lighter in engagement. There's still quite a few people on the platform, to be clear, hundreds of thousands of athletes. But we wanted to see how people would respond as they saw some of their levels changing, and we got a lot of feedback. That was just a miss. We should have over-communicated here. We won't make that mistake again. Look, I love our community. I love how passionate they are, and I'm directly accountable to make sure that they feel like insiders and they've committed their time on the platform, and we owe it back. So I take that one directly on the chin and apologize, but here we are moving forward. The couple of missteps that I think we had to get here were we didn't do enough internal testing before we put out in the community, and that's what we were trying to fix over this Northern Hemisphere spring. And even to today, there's still several people that are like, hey, look, this banked XP thing is too complex. It's a big black box math problem. Give me the lump sum payment. I just want to level up to where I'm at and then reset. And I really think that's been the crux of the feedback from the community.
Is that direction where you think you're headed?
Yeah. So, I've spoken with a few people on our game team in the last couple of days, and the team obsesses about this like crazy. The reality is it's many different community members have different opinions of how we approach this, but really have been thankful for everyone's feedback directly across the forums. one thing that is not changing, levels 1 through 27, basically are staying at the same accelerated rate that they've been at. Now with our the new curve that is now in place for all Zwifters as of a couple weeks ago, we have increased the level of difficulty as, go higher in those levels to create a little bit more challenge. But I think this big piece of, hey, can we just have a lump sum leveling if I have banked XP? We're considering that. So no commitments right now, but we're definitely considering whether or not we could just do that as an option to, for those that would like to do it. It kind of kills the mechanic, right? Because then you just jump right to it. But at the same time, this is, you put deposits into your bank account, and, we do believe that there's value in being able to make a choice of how you'd like to have that recognized. So we're looking at that. And now we also really have to look at what happens next. So there, several members have made it to level 100, and we celebrate them. It's amazing, that achievement. And for those that will look at it, we want to make sure that this system has a future in the first place. So additionally, the feedback has been around, is there a prestiging system, or are we going to get another 100 levels, etc.? And we're taking that feedback very much in stride. System.
It sounds like going forward, Mark, that getting rid of banking XP is fundamentally something that needs to be done. Would you agree with that?
I don't know if it's getting rid of it. I think it's just how do we respect it? There's no way to fundamentally get rid of banking XP up until this point. If you've done the work, we don't want to take any of that value away. But I think the point that you're making here is any additional status systems that we set towards the future, we don't want to have it be as convoluted and as complex as it is today. It should be much simpler to understand. And that's really the intent of what we'd like to do going forward.
What would you say that you and the team have learned about through this whole experience?
I think the big piece, first off, is that level and XP really matters to Zwifters. And I think that's not a new thing for us to know. When we've hosted double XP events in Tour Watopia, oh man, that's when the whole community comes together. I think the piece here, though, is we're seeing infographics being built by community leaders and people graphing and tracking their schema here. Our community is looking at these details to a level of depth that our engineers are. And so we need to respect and acknowledge that. And I think the big piece is from a communication standpoint, we really want to be day to day in stride. It's difficult to do that at all times to make sure that, we're as accessible and as communicative in a two-way communication. But that's our commitment, and really we'll just make sure to not misstep on that.
Thanks for taking the time, Mark. We really do appreciate it, and continued good luck.
Eric, credit where it's due. I mean, Mark there and in the forum, he kind of held his hands up and said, yeah, we got this wrong. But I've got two kind of follow-up questions for you. I mean, firstly, it may not look like it, but HQ were actually trying to make things better. I mean, they weren't trying to make things worse. They were definitely trying to make things better. And actually, if you set aside the kind of crazy complex nature of the XP system, and I'm not sure we're able to do that, but if you do, actually this was more of a huge communications failure than anything else.
Yeah. I'd agree on both of those. Of course, Zwift was trying to make things better. That being said, like you said, the level system still has significant problems that need to be fixed, like the idea that we can run out of levels and the confusing acceleration system. But last week's changes, I think, were good changes. I don't think there's a lot of pushback on the changes themselves. Making it a little bit harder to level up, I think, was a good move. But like you said, the lack of communication, I think that was the problem here. It was just confusing to people.
I mean, do you think, in general, that the XP system, the whole leveling up system, is just too darn complicated?
Yes. The complication part of it is the level acceleration, where every time that Zwift has added levels to the system, they've built an acceleration piece in it so that the people who had leveled out and had banked all this extra XP, they can still enjoy leveling up. They just level up faster. But the problem is every time Zwift has added levels, they've changed how the acceleration system works. So you've got, 3 different ways that it's worked, 4 different ways maybe that it's worked over the years. And even the people at Zwift, very few people at Zwift understand it. The guy who created the most current acceleration system no longer works at Zwift. In fact, so it's a mess. I think acceleration just needs to go away. I think we just need to put people at the right level and give us infinite levels so every Zwifter has something they're working for, and leave it at that. Keep it simple.
Shane, we've been here before, no? The politicians call it rolling the pitch, meaning to prepare an audience or a community, or even voters for that matter, for a bit of a change by explaining why it's necessary, when it's coming, and what the benefits theoretically will be. Zwift didn't roll the pitch this time, and in our fairly lengthy experience of these matters, I must say it's not the very first time that a Zwift pitch has gone unrolled. Do you think they've now invested in a very heavy roller and someone to push it?
Again, we're here again, aren't we? Look, just as features of a technical nature need acceptance testing prior to release, like anything technical has to be tested before rolling it out. I think it'd be good for Zwift to run these non-technical changes by a focus group before release. And maybe they did, in which case I'd recommend them expanding that focus group just a little bit. So look, the way I see it, Zwift are undoubtedly removing a lot of friction from the platform with cheaper hardware, offering virtual shifting to other trainer manufacturers, supporting direct connect Wi-Fi connections, which makes life so much easier. It's becoming too common for Zwift to pull moves that adds community friction. So in recent times, we've seen the subscription price bump. That's community friction. The XP level changes. It's community friction. So that's what I'm seeing here. So change is inevitable, but look, back to the rolling the pitch analogy, which I assume is from cricket. I think they need to spend some time in the nets working on their delivery, because the next ball can't be a wrong-un. And about this point, we've probably lost the entire non-cricket savvy listeners. So that's where I'm at with that.
Well, Zwift have a bit of a history of bowling Yorkers in the community, shall we say. That ball that slips under the bat and knocks all the wickets down.
Right at the feet.
Okay, we'll take a break from numbers for a few moments, but they're coming back because on the subject of XP, I dug out from HQ some really, really interesting numbers about how many Zwifters are on which level. Next, though, let's look forward to Le Tour de France Femmes avec Zwift, which is coming up in around a week or so. I caught up with Kate Berrineau, head of women's cycling at HQ. Hey, Kate.
Hello, Simon.
One of the last times I saw you, you were applying road rash treatment to my right knee after a rather embarrassing little tumble in Santa Monica.
Oh, I totally understood it, though. There's a lot to see in Santa Monica. You were looking around, maybe got distracted for a minute, maybe been Zwifting too much. Who knows?
Well, your medical skills were excellent, but that's not what we're here to talk about. With the company's involvement in the Tour de France Femmes avec Zwift, that makes you a pretty powerful and influential person in the sport. How have you best used that influence?
It's a dream job, honestly. It's such a personal thing for me because I was a domestic pro cyclist and I was disappointed by the opportunities. And I came to Zwift in 2016 to start the Zwift Academy program, which was going to create a new pathway to the pros for a woman cyclist. 8 years ago, and now to be standing on the podium of the Tour de France Femmes avec Zwift, representing the work that we're trying to do in this space, is an absolute dream.
You are very influential. Give me a specific example, if you can, of how you feel you've influenced something within the sport.
This is a long play. We're trying to grow women's cycling to grow women on Zwift. And in doing that, we're trying to be leaders in the industry in creating more space for women, more visibility for women, which is going to in turn deliver more inspiration and motivation for women. So when I was growing up, I couldn't watch women ride bikes. So we're expecting, a whole new generation of women cyclists to be inspired by this race. It was really part of the fabric of our brand.
Kate, summarize the progress you think women's cycle in general has made in, say, the past couple of years.
Summarize night and day. It is extraordinary. I think it's exceeded all of our expectations. If you stop any person on the street and say, name a bike race, there's only one. It's Tour de France, and women weren't there. And now that they are there, now that they are enjoying, that world stage and all the visibility that comes with it, we're seeing incredible progress in the sport. I mean, some of the fun examples are, a lot of Kopecky Fan Day in Belgium and Nike signing Demi Vollering. There's tons more fans, sponsorship, investment, media attention, all the things that are needed to really grow the sport and to build a sustainable future for the sport. Now, women are seeing that kind of growth opportunity.
Yeah, and I think even the most casual cycling fan would recognise that is the case. I mean, women's cycling has never been more competitive, more visible, and more exciting, actually. And I think that can't be denied, really. I mean, the partnership with Le Tour for Zwift, as you've highlighted, is obviously absolutely critical in so many areas. Just remind us, Kate, how long's the current deal, and is there a dialogue open to extend it?
Yes, there absolutely is a deal. We actually, I can say here that we've triggered an extension for 2026, which was in the original contract, but our option. So we are the title sponsors through 2026, so that'll make it 5 years till then, and we're already talking about the future.
There is, this kind of altruistic passion project to support and promote women's cycling at Zwift. But obviously, there's kind of hard-headed business reasons to do that too. And one of the metrics that surely must be absolutely critical in assessing how successful that's been is how much growth in female participation on the Zwift platform that we've seen. Can you give us any insights there?
Sure. Well, we're definitely seeing growth, especially in the regions that the race is most popular. But this is a long play. We are in this, to grow the sport, to grow women's cycling, which will in turn grow women on Zwift. We did not expect to see a 10% jump in women on Zwift immediately, though we are thrilled to see, like I said, especially in those areas, some significant growth. But this is really about leading in the industry, about setting an example, about us being very upfront with what our mission is, and that is, to grow the sport, to elevate women's cycling, to feel that, something that we've done on our platform since the beginning, which is make cycling more accessible. We get incredible brand awareness. The visibility of the race, we saw 105 million hours viewed in 2023 across 190 countries. So that's incredible brand visibility, and that will, drive, our subs up, and will drive especially women up.
TV coverage, media coverage is critical to making women's cycling as successful as it can be. In general, first, how much progress do you think has been made there? And specifically, how easy is it going to be able to watch the Tour de France Femmes avec Zwift this year?
I don't watch men's cycling that much anymore because I don't have the time after I'm done watching all the women's cycling that I want to watch. When people say on a Monday, did you watch Tour of Flanders? It's not necessarily clear whether you're talking about the men's or women's race. So we're raising the standard of, the big races are now all broadcast. And it's a lot easier to watch. I mean, I've personally found it in America, where it's not always the most accessible, it's been pretty easy this year. So for those that do want to watch, in the USA, it's going to be on CNBC and Peacock. In Canada, it's on Flow Bikes. In Europe, of course, it's going to be all over Eurosport. And in Australia, SBS. And just a plug for the actual dates too there, Simon. It's August 12th through 18th this year, but we can get into that.
Okay. Note for the diary, August 12th to the 18th. This is a bit of a strange question, Kate, but I notice it because my kind of background is in media. Does it ever annoy you that in media coverage of Le Tour de France Femmes avec Zwift, writers and broadcasters often seem to miss out that avec Zwift?
I have been known to send a few DMs directly to presenters, to writers, to team managers, because here's the deal. We're sponsoring this race to support everyone. We know sponsorship drives cycling. And if you don't credit the sponsors, the value of that sponsorship goes down. So if you want us to keep showing up to do this massive investment that we know is changing the sport in dramatic and very positive ways, you got to keep the avec Zwift there. I mean, the truth is it wouldn't have happened without that avec Zwift. And, when I do say something to a journalist or to a commentator, they're like, you know what? You're absolutely right.
I bet you bang on about it endlessly, and quite rightly too. Last question, Kate Verneau. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but your name sounds kind of a bit French. Do we think, were you born for this role, Kate?
Oui, c'est vrai. No, I'm actually learning French. I'm French Canadian. Don't tell the ASO. But I'm learning French because everybody does try to speak to me in French over there when they see my name tag. So I have become quite the Francophile in the last couple of years in seeing the beauty and majesty of this race and the incredible fans that come out on the side of the road and the support that we've seen for this women's race. I now have to learn the language because it's a beautiful country. It's a beautiful thing. And I'm very happy to be spending more time there.
And there are a ton of Tour de France Femmes avec Zwift related events on the platform throughout August. Kate will be back just before the end of the episode to give us a rundown on those. Nathan, yo dude, I must say first off. But more pertinently, I'm going to ask you whether you think you could sustain a position that says sponsoring the women's tour is pretty much the most important thing Zwift do, at least from a brand position.
Yeah, from a brand position, I can get behind that 100%. I have to imagine a world where the TDF Femmes doesn't exist. And then if that is, then we're talking about Zwift is a part of something more than just solving the problem of I'm sitting in a basement and it's cold outside or whatever it is, solving that problem. The attachment to cycling in that kind of way for like a good in the world in general, and not just a product solution for my needs, is a really, really good thing for the brand. And when brands do that kind of thing and attach to them, like you see this across the Olympics with like Pepsi or Coke or like McDonald's. Like there's things that brands grow around when they get attached to goods that are in the world that we have an expectation for. And I think Zwift have done an amazing job in their main demographic by doing this, especially with women's cycling. So 100% brand perspective, I couldn't think of anything else they're doing in the world from that perspective that is better, actually.
Dave, back from Nice, was there kind of palpable excitement in Nice? I mean, obviously among the Zwift people, but did you pick up just how important the women's tour is to female cycling, to the ASO, to the people on the side of the road?
100%. What I saw that was so impactful is first, to dovetail into what Nathan was saying. Kate plays such a huge role right now in changing the landscape of sport. There's no doubt that more young women and girls are getting into sport and seeing the benefits of that. But here's exactly to get to your question. When you're with Zwift people, first off, the energy within the company and the pride is so cool to see. Everybody has completely bought in on why this matters and how important this event is. I know this could be a little anecdotal, but what you see when Zwift, giving the French compliments, Zwift also deserves one. The live event activation that they do is an absolute blast. And the thing that I love, Simon, was seeing the 8-year-old girl coming in with her mom or dad, possibly brothers and sisters too, who realizes for the first time that there's actually a future. If she wants to get into cycling, if she's good at it and really dedicates herself, there is a Tour de France for her. And I think it was embarrassing, to be honest, in my life now, Simon, where for majority of my announcing career, the question of why isn't there a women's Tour de France has come up over and over and over. And I take so much pride being at events now and being able to tell the audience or I do a lot of live PA announcing and being able to tell that crowd that, hey, guess what? Things are changing. There is a women's Tour de France now, and it's on the same level as the men's. It's not a rinky-dink imitation that's poorly executed. I know that was a long answer, but there's a lot of reasons to be excited about it. And Zwift as a brand is changing the landscape, not in cycling, but honestly, just the planet itself is better when we respect women and give them the same opportunities. It's about time.
I think the most important thing you said there, Dave, was that 8-year-old girl. You know, that 8-year-old girl can now, she's got role models. She sees a race that one day she could enter. She could dream of being on the podium. And to a large extent, that wasn't there before. And certainly, there used to be a Women's Tour de France, but then there was a long hiatus. But now that 8-year-old girl can see a future for herself as a pro cyclist. We have a go at Zwift when we think they've got things wrong, but my goodness me, they've got this one right. They do a great job on it.
Right on.
Now, even before all this XP stuff blew up, I'd asked HQ if they could give me some stats on the numbers of Zwifters at each level. That was actually prompted by a listener's question, and it'd been a while since we last got any breakdown of the data. So here is what Zwift told me. Right, first we need to define some terms. HQ gave me numbers of what they called, in quote marks, engaged Zwifters. These are people who are both paying and actively riding. So, although, as we'll hear shortly, there is a small amount of cloudiness in one of the metrics with people on free trials, that is not a big, large, significant factor in the rest of the numbers. The numbers were pulled from HQ's system in late July, so they're bang up to date. Okay. Pin back your ears. Right, there are 4 sections. To me, the first and the last are the most interesting and or surprising. Here we go. 45% of all engaged Zwifters are level 1 to 10. That is almost half of all Zwifters are not past level 10.
Right on!
19% of all engaged Zwifters are level 11 to 20, and 36% of all engaged Zwifters are above level 21. So around a third of Zwifters are somewhere between level 22 and level 100. That's a kind of big spread, so that is a little bit woolly and muddy because that's a lot of levels. The next and final stat is very, very clear. The percentage of Zwifters at level 100, the highest you can currently go, is 0.06%. 0.06%. Now, in numbers, actual numbers, let's, for the purposes of this and only this exercise, let's just assume that there are 1 million engaged Zwifters. Out of those 1 million, a mere 600 are level 100. That is one very, very exclusive club.
Right on!
And one final stat, the median Zwifter is level 10, and that is all time, since the dawn of time in Watopia, or even maybe before Watopia, but, that's all time, since the very start of Zwift. Now, not to go down too many statistical rabbit holes here, median is the middle number on a sorted list, so that is only one way of describing the average Zwifter. But if you accept the median description of average, then the average Zwifter is level 10. Whew, few, lots of numbers, but they are mighty interesting. Eric, I'm obviously surprised by the kind of exclusivity of the level 100 club, but actually more so at the bottom end of the level scale. Almost half of all Zwifters are 1 to 10. I mean, I thought about this and I could only come to one conclusion, that there are loads and loads and loads of new Zwifters. Is that how you read it?
Yeah. I mean, when I first saw that level 45, or not level, when I first saw that 45% figure, it was really surprising. To be honest, my first thought was, did Zwift get the stats wrong? Because it just doesn't seem possible. Because looking at the numbers, if to get above level 10, to get to level 11 requires 13,000 XP. So that would take a rider, that's 650 kilometers of riding, 400 miles of riding. And that's without figuring in any bonuses like streaks or route badges, which I'm sure new riders would get. So I look at that and I think that would take me less than a month to get to level 100 on Zwift. And that's not me speaking as a veteran Zwifter who rides on Zwift a lot now and didn't when I started. I actually went back and looked, and in my first month on Zwift, I did over 650 kilometers. So I would have leveled up in under a month back in 2015. But if I take a step back, what these numbers show me is that a big portion of Zwift customers are nothing like me. And I think that's really important to understand that they are.
Absolutely. And excuse me for interrupting there, Eric, nothing like the loud voices you hear in the community.
Nothing like me and nothing like all of you who are listening to this podcast. Right? I think they're newer cyclists. They're less fit cyclists. They're people who maybe they're really fit people, but they ride on Zwift only very occasionally because they do most of their riding outdoors. So I guess for me, the next time that I'm annoyed at Zwift because they're not improving racing fast enough, or they still haven't added a freaking fourth challenge, or because of the level cap at 100 that I'm stuck at, I think I can remind myself now that Zwift has all these new customers that they really need to invest into. How do you get those people plugged into the platform? That seems to be the vexing question that Zwift is stuck with. How do you reduce new customer churn? It seems like that's really what Zwift needs to figure out.
Nathan, turning to you, I mean, one thing I guess this could mean, although Zwift have always denied that they've had a problem with churn, but 40-odd%, nearly half of all Zwifters on level 1 to 10, that says to me, as I previously discussed with Eric, a lot of new Zwifters. It could also mean a hell of a lot of churn, couldn't it?
Yeah, that's exactly what I thought when I first heard this, was like, okay, engaged, and the words engaged Zwifter there. Now the definitions and what does that mean? But like that would, you get through. So the math just isn't mathing for me if there isn't high churn, or there's just like a lot of new people coming in, checking it out, up to level 5, 6, or 7, and then not really coming back. And now you got a whole lot of new Zwifters that are all checking it out, level 5, 6, or 7, and churn. Exactly that. And so when I talk to Zwift, like a common thing throughout all the years that I've been interacting with Zwift, and what I've read behind their eyes, and is that we think on two different spaces, because I'm the level 100 like crazy. Okay. That's that really 0.06%. Right. And my perspective on what's needed is really, really, and this number actually, while I was thinking about this one, was like, oh, that's what I'm seeing behind their eyes. And I've gotten it a lot more the last year or two, but like, behind the eyes at Zwift is like, they're thinking about those people a lot. And I appreciate that number actually, because it helps me understand the community that I'm in some ways that maybe I don't understand them completely all the time.
Shane, let's just get your reaction to these stats. I mean, I asked for them after being prompted to do so by a listener, and actually it was a really good call. I was absolutely, to return to our cricket analogy, I was bowled over by a googly when I saw these stats. I mean, get your reaction first of all. Almost half of all, and they're calling them engaged Zwifters, we'll call them proper Zwifters, almost half are only level 1 to 10. I was staggered by that.
The openers are still batting. They haven't put many runs on the board at all. It's a cricket heavy episode, this one. Look, it's surprising, but really not enough detail to draw many conclusions from. But what with the little glimpse we do have, though, my concern from what we've been given is, does it indicate that there's a lot of new riders on Zwift, or the stickiness isn't as sticky as it could be? Are people only holidaying on Watopia and not returning home after they have a bit of a ride and that's it? I guess Zwift have a lot more insight, no doubt, but all we can do is speculate. But those numbers, I'm keen to hear what everyone else's take on them is.
I don't understand it. And I did go back and challenge them on these figures, and they said, well, actually, we are migrating systems, but we have been very careful looking at this in the answers that we gave you, and we are quite confident in the robustness of these numbers. But my, oh my, they're surprising. At the other end, 0.06% on level 100. Is that as kind of gobsmacking?
Not nearly as much. If you had asked me to give a number, I would have said 500 to 2,000 Zwifters are at that level. That would have been my guess. But I think it is another good reminder when I'm complaining that Zwift hasn't figured out how to level people up over level 100. It makes sense that maybe they're spending time on something that's a little more. They're spending time on the 450,000 Zwifters who are below level 11 instead of the 600 who aren't going anywhere anyway, who are at level 100.
Heading off on another tangent, it makes you begin to understand how viscerally important the Zwift ride is.
Yeah. Yeah, getting people on a setup that's easy to use and reliable. I think that's all part of that secret sauce that Zwift needs to figure out, that'll move people from level 1 up to level 11. And there's other things. There's, plugging them into the community, I think helps. Getting them in a training plan that really inspires them and really gives them feedback. I think there's a couple really, really key pieces that Zwift could improve on that would help with that metric.
Right, next. Well, it's another numerical based feature. I did warn listeners, but numbers, they do make the world go round. So let's talk about Zwift Racing Score. Eric, before we hear about the latest developments in this, could you please just give us a very quick history of how the Zwift Racing course started? Because it's not brand new. The iteration of it currently is new, but it's not brand new, I don't think. How did it start, and what is it trying to achieve?
Let's start with the goal. What's it trying to achieve? Anyone who's done a Zwift race in the past several years would know that Zwift racers are put into categories based on your power numbers. That's a really simple way to group people, which is why it was done. But it's not the best way, because what it does is it invites sandbagging, because riders who have power near the top of their category can just keep winning races without ever being upgraded. So Zwift has talked for years about wanting to move to a results-based category system, and everybody agrees that this is the way forward. So a year ago, the first version of Zwift Racing Score was released for some test events. But what happened is Zwift immediately got pushback when they rolled it out, because basically what they rolled out was Zwift Power's tired old ranking system. And Zwift might have gotten away with it, except that Tim Hansen, a member of the Zwift community, a racer, he had built the zwiftracing.app website, and he developed a ranking system that was light years ahead of Zwift Powers. And racers knew about this. So they felt like Zwift was taking a step backward by implementing something that fell way short of what the community had already built. So to their credit, Zwift, they saw the error of their ways and stopped doing those test events. They went back to the drawing board. They brought Tim Hansen in as a consultant, and they spent several months working on getting it right. And they just launched this new version of Zwift Racing Score a full year after the first version. So that brings us to where we are today.
Yep, excellent summary. Okay, well, that's where we are. Where we're going next? Well, Zwift staffer James Bailey has been integral to the development of Zwift Racing Score from the Zwift side, so I asked him about the latest iteration. Hi, Jane.
Hi, Simon.
Zwift Racing Score. In the end, I think, and maybe you can confirm this for me, it should replace the pretty crude A, B, C, D system. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So certainly from a Zwift-owned event point of view, there may be some community organisers who might still want to use the older category system, but from our side of things, we will be looking to use it in all of our events.
We hope, actually, that it will be adopted by the community and basically become the new standard for racing categories.
That would definitely be our hope, especially given how much the community have been asking for this. I would be quite surprised if it wasn't adapted very heavily.
And one of the ways that Zwift is going to hone it and find it down is by a series of events, which I think you've helped to organise. What are we going to get out of those events? Or what, actually more to the point, what are you going to get out of those events? Data, basically, I assume?
Yeah, absolutely. Data and feedback. So we will be able to see from a data point of view how riders' scores go up and down and by how much they decay over time. But more importantly, I think even more importantly, is how it makes people feel by changing from 4 power-based categories where different people put down power in different ways. We would be extending to 5 or potentially 10 score-based categories with the aim of making the racing experience fairer and more competitive for all.
And how long has Zwift been trying to do this? I mean, forever, and it's a really tough ask. They've had a number of goes at it. How confident are you that this go will be right?
With almost certainty, and I know this is going to come bite me, but I am absolutely certain we will go live with this in the coming months. We're doing testing for a solid month to get as much data and feedback as possible. And then we will review. If we need to make tweaks, we will do. I think realistically, the category ranges that we've agreed on, they may need tweaking slightly, as well as the algorithm for how increases and decreases in scores are applied.
Couple of questions, James. We've discussed this so often that we're so fed up with it, we've pretty much stopped discussing it and almost banned the word on the Zwiftcast, but sandbagging. Could this finally definitively be an end to sandbagging?
Almost. So in terms of people that coast for the entire race and sprint, their scores will go up and they'll promote into the next category. The only real way I can see people that do want to sandbag will have to enter races, complete races, and lose multiple times to drop them back into the next category below. They will then go coast, sprint, win race, promote to the next category again, and then they'll have to go through the whole thing. It'll be
so much trouble.
An extreme. Oh yeah, exactly. So I wouldn't say it would entirely eliminate sandbagging, but I think it'll go a long way to doing so.
I mean, the effort of actually being a sandbagger will now be more than the reward that being a sandbagger brings.
Exactly, yeah.
I hesitate to use the word cheating, but are there any other defences against sharp practice that people can use to make racing unfair? And you might not be able to tell me what they are, but are there kind of protocols built in to defeat the kind of behaviour that you don't want to see?
In terms of other things, there are always things we can look into from a competition fairness point of view. We will absolutely look at those things, but at this stage, I can't commit to what specifically we will be doing over the next 12 months.
I can see that the aim of this for sure is to make racing cleaner, fairer, and ultimately more enjoyable. Which of those 3 things is the most important?
Enjoyability, without doubt. Zwift exists as something to either just have fun on, continue a fitness journey. So if you can have fun at the same time, then it's just so much better and you're just going to keep on wanting to come back like I have done and countless others have done as well.
What proportion of Zwifters race these days? Is that, do you have that information? Is it talked about?
Guess around 1 in 5.
About 20%. Yeah. But that's like super commission, aren't they?
Not every. I mean, you absolutely have highly engaged racers that will race multiple times a week, but that there'll also be those who maybe just race once a month, once every 3 months. That there are very definitely clearly well-defined levels of type of Zwift racer, from elite to highly engaged community to, I might just give this a go.
I think you will absolutely have 99.999% of the Zwift racing community behind you. So the very best of luck with it.
Thank you. We are very excited about this.
Eric, we're in a fairly extensive testing program now. I think it's scheduled last week, if not months, as is only correct. Do you think it's possible to say when the changes that the new ZRS heralds are going to be implemented? And secondly, because I always like to ask you two questions, and you never forget the first, I've noticed that about you. And secondly, what effect do you think that any changes or likely changes will have on the Zwift racing community?
Well, Zwift likes to test things in the summer when traffic numbers are low, so they can be kind of fixed and bugs worked out, and then launched in the fall when Zwift season begins. So I would say it's a safe guess that what Zwift is shooting for is to release Zwift Racing Score in a big way in the fall, and that's why they're holding those test races right now. As to what effect the Zwift racing community is going to feel from this, I think it could only be good things. First, because it really should do away with just about all of the sandbagging that's happening. And that's a big win for the lower categories. It really doesn't matter for the elite racers, for the A, sandbagging doesn't, but for D, C, and B, it really does. And another thing is that I'm hoping Zwift Racing Score, it's going to give people a metric besides their finishing position.
That goes up and down, depending on how they do in races.
Exactly. Yeah. So you might not get on the podium, but if your score goes up in that race, you get something. It means you performed better than the system thought you would. And that's a nice pat on the back, even if you finish mid-pack.
Dave, the eventual death and hopefully decent burial of the A, B, C, and D racing categories, and possibly, we never know, but possibly the end of sandbagging, no guarantees there, but the end of A, B, C, and D is definitely coming. This is a big change.
Huge. It's one of the topics that just seems to be endless. I doubt that we ever completely solve sandbagging. I think that's going to be ingrained in human DNA somehow for the rest of time, but this seems like a really good move to me. You know, a lot of times now, what we've got going on out in the real world racing is this over categorization, where you have categories separated by every gender, every possible way, really, that you could, including 5-year age gaps. And then you have podium ceremonies. At times, I'll do podium presentations that go on for 2 hours of podiums. 78 podiums we presented at some of the events that I've done. And it loses value. It really does. So the new thing out here in real world racing is this kind of letting people self-categorize themselves. Just have an A, B, and a C. There's no men's or women's. There's no masters. There's no juniors. You just allow folks, and it's been working really well. And I think that some of that applies here, where a new formula was needed. And sounds like they've got this pretty close to, we'll see how it plays out in the next 6 months or so, but I feel like this is a really positive step forward.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, of course, racing is about winning, and it's nice to win. But if you do well in a race, Nathan, with this new system, okay, so you might not win, you might not make the podium, but if you increase your racing score, you've got something out of that race.
Yeah, there's a prize now that is inherent to your journey through racing on Zwift. And so you have some sort of an outcome from that not only like gives you something that, oh, I earned something or here's my result, outside of just like your result in a list of people who came across the line. But then you can go and work on that result. It's absolutely great. The other thing is that you now have results-based categorization. One of the main problems that has been talked about for years is like you walk into a racing situation and here's an assumption about how things are going to work out, not how things have worked out, and now we rank you based on that, right? So like we make some assumption about how a race is going to work out based on a fitness score, or some sort of test that you've done that has nothing to do with like how you race a bike. And so we were in fitness land still. We weren't in racing land, right? We were in a place where it was about, you know, what you do all alone in your workouts, rather than what do I do when I actually compete with someone. And I like that a lot for the reason that racing is a lot more than just an exercise competition. There's a lot more that goes into that.
It's going to be interesting, Dave, to see if that whole kind of nudging, changing people's behavior by kind of encouraging rather than sanctioning, going to be interesting to see if that works.
It's going to be a fascinating study, to tell you the truth. I mean, if this has an impact, this would apply to a lot of things out there in this universe for sure. So, yeah, I'm all on board with everything that they're trying to do here. And I agree with that assessment from James. If it's that much trouble to sandbag, I mean, it just seems like something that you have to be out of your mind to want to do. And I certainly hope that that's the case.
Yeah, absolutely. Completely right. I think we will all watch this new system with a huge amount of interest, but it definitely looks very, very promising. Dave, thank you. Nathan, thank you. Eric, thank you. Shane, thank you. And that is another Zwiftcast crossing the finish line with its arms in the air. Just before we go, a big thanks to my co-host, which I've just done. I'm so polite I've done it twice. And a reminder from Kate Veronneau of how Zwifters can get involved on the platform with the Tour de France Femmes avec Zwift.
Ooh, August is a big one. We're going to have a Femmes mission in which you can climb the elevation of Alpe du Zwift, aka Alpe d'Huez, which is the final stage of the Women's Tour de France Femmes avec Zwift this year. And there's a huge, very exciting, fun prize on the line for one lucky winner. So that's something very exciting. We'll have podcast rides and watch party rides for those that really want to go next level with the tour. This fall, I'm very excited about rolling out some new content with the Zwift Women's Training Club that is up to like 9,000 members. So get in there, get ready for some new training programs, some new community events. And then, you know, I'd love to hear from the community, especially the women's community. If there's a way of contacting you, Simon, or responding to this podcast on one of the social channels, would we like to see something like a SRAM Women's Tour, a Vox Women Tour, or a specialized mixtape? Some of our early women-specific community tours and events, would we like to see those come back? Because I'm very happy to bring them back, but I kind of want to understand where the temperature's at.
Right on.
This is the bit where we say thanks very much to Zwift. Thanks, Zwift, for supporting the Zwiftcast. And we also like to remind listeners that we decide what goes into the podcast, not Zwift. Thanks for listening.